So for those of you who are regular followers of my channel, you've probably noticed that I'm putting out fewer videos during the week. What I'm finding is that currently, after all the issues that I had with fake copyright claims, I've been finding that my videos just aren't going anywhere. But it seems that if I give it a few days in between posting videos, they are getting views. So hence the reason why I'm putting fewer out at the moment, because it seems that that's the only way that my videos are actually getting into the algorithm. I don't know why it works that way right now, because previously it was the opposite and I needed to get them out every day to keep them moving in the algorithm. So if you can explain YouTube's algorithm to me, go for it. So moving on to today's video. This is a video by I guess you could say she's an expat Australian, expat American moved to Australia. In other words, she was born in Australia, lived in Australia till she was 8, moved to California and then moved back to Australia as an adult. So she did a video about a month ago, reasons not to move to Australia, and this is her follow-up video of reasons why you should move to Australia. I know I've done a few videos like this recently, but it just seems to be whatever pops up in the YouTube feed. This one I found interesting because of her background, and I think she did have, or she does have, a slightly different perspective to other migrants just because of having originally come from Australia in the first place. Is she correct about it all? Well, let's find out.
Australia, the land of the free and the home of... Australia, the land of the golden soil and well for toil, whatever the words say.
Okay, how to instantaneously label yourself as an outsider. I find it disappointing that she's basically made fun of this. And okay, you can come at me all you like, but I do take offence at this. We don't have a particularly great national anthem, but it is our national anthem. And I think were she to do the same thing with the American anthem thing that they sing, well, she probably wouldn't do, because she grew up in America and she probably is like, you know, all hail the stars and stripes. Whereas she's essentially saying she can't be bothered looking up our national anthem. Okay, sorry, that's just me having a little snark to start the video. Possibly not the best way to start, but I do take offence when someone comes from a cultural background where they are so very highly respectful of their national anthem to then come here and make a joke of ours.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about more details about why you should move to Australia. There is actually a part 2 on this video, but you can watch them in any order, it doesn't matter. But welcome to part 2, let's get into it. Oh wait, also, before we even start this video, I do need to explain about my American accent. I was actually born in Australia and grew up actually in this very house, which is crazy. I grew up in Australia until I was 8 years old, moved over to America, and just moved back. I think about 2 years ago. It's almost my 2-year anniversary of being here. I grew up just learning so much of what it's like to live in Australia, and that was my only real thought of what the world was like. But then when I moved over to America, I got more perspective, and now moving back, I just see everything a little bit differently as an adult. This will be me sharing the reasons on why I moved to Australia and why someone like you should move to Australia as well. First things first, it is so easy to travel within Australia. I feel a lot of the time when you look at Australia on a map, it doesn't look that big, but it's actually the same size, if not a little bit bigger, than the United States of America.
Yeah, she's pretty close there. In actual fact, I think Australia is like 99% the size of America. Correct me if I'm wrong, I've actually done this in several videos, but right now it's escaping me.
So even though it's huge, a lot of it is empty, but there are some good spots to travel around. So a lot of people travel around Australia in caravans. They'll put their whole life into this little van and driving around Australia. A lot of people do that, but you can also fly to different places as well. So I'm based in Melbourne, so it's super easy for me to fly up to Sydney, to Brisbane, anywhere in between, even to fly up to Darwin or Perth. It's just overall pretty easy.
Finally, someone who actually acknowledges that it's actually not all that hard to get from one place to another in Australia. Yes, flying between states is really easy, but not only that, we've got some pretty good highways or freeways. So, you know, it might take, if you want to drive, if you enjoy road trips, it might take you a while to drive from one capital city to the next, for example. But there's so many fantastic stops along the way that, you know, you can make a trip of it. So for me, it's probably, 7 hours drive from Bendigo to Canberra. There's plenty of really nice places to stop along the way. I could do it in one day, or I could do it in 2 days and stop and enjoy things like the Silo Art or some of the beautiful towns that are between here and Canberra. It's not like it's all bare land like a lot of people seem to imply.
And also Australia has a ton of different climates. The north is very sunny, very humid and tropical. The south is a little bit more of this like dry desert going on as well. Or you could travel to places like Tasmania where I think they get snow. I actually don't know if they get snow there. There's definitely places in Victoria that do get snow as well.
Yes, Tasmania definitely gets snow. There's some places that get snow every year, like, you know, Cradle Mountain, Ben Lomond, etc. Generally, you can expect that there's going to be snow at Oatlands once or twice a year. And then every couple of years you get snow down in Hobart. So Tassie definitely gets plenty of snow. And of course Mount Wellington, unless it's a rather warm winter, you can guarantee that there's going to be snow on the mountain at some point in time.
I feel like a lot of people, when they think of Australia, only think of like Gold Coast, which is really sunny and really nice. And yes, that is a large part of Australia, but there's also this other side that's just way more like foresty, but like in a dry way, like more like grassland kind of vibe. Australia really has it all, which is really cool.
And again, someone who is actually acknowledging that Australia isn't all super, super hot like you hear in so many videos. That said, right now I would just do anything for a beautiful afternoon sea breeze. Doesn't happen here in Bendigo, and it's one thing that I miss so much. So looking at this picture, I want to be at the beach right now.
And if you're looking to travel outside of Australia, it's also quite close. I mean, relatively close. You're not in Europe where everything is like a 30-minute walk. But the other countries are a lot closer as well. So for example, you can fly to New Zealand, you can fly to different islands like the Philippines or Fiji or Malaysia. I think from Sydney to Japan, it's about a 10-hour flight as well. I feel like everything is within 10 hours, like even Hawaii is 10 hours from Sydney too. So everything is like relatively close and you get so much variance within like a 10-hour flight, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, there seems to be that real perception, doesn't there, that since it takes so long to get to the United States or to Europe, that Australia is super, super isolated. But we're not. Like she said, there's so many different places that are much closer to Australia and are fantastic holidays. I mean, honestly, I could do multiple trips to New Zealand and still be seeing so much new things. But not only that, you know, travelling within the country, there's so much to see. Japan, who wouldn't want to go to Japan? Like, okay, maybe some people don't, but for me, it would definitely be in my top 5. You've got Vietnam, Pacific Islands, so many places that are not that difficult to get to from Australia.
Speaking a little bit more on the nature side of things, and I really realized this growing up too, but Australia has way more concern for the environment here than I feel like other countries do, especially the US. So, for example, when I was a kid, we had a lot of rules around saving water. When you'd shower, you'd have to put a bucket underneath you, and that's what you'd use to water your plants. And like when you're brushing your teeth, you were told not to leave the tap running. When you shower, it should only be for 5 minutes as well. There was so much more discussion about saving water and being mindful of your water usage. In comparison, when we're in California, I remember my mom telling me that California was in a drought, and I was like, really? But no one really cares though. And she's like, yeah, exactly. There's people out watering their cement or just leaving the water running. I remember going to school one time and seeing someone else wash their hands in the bathroom, and they just left the water running as they went to go grab paper towels. And I was like, what the hell? Like, 8-year-old me was so confused on why they were doing that. And I feel like it even sticks with me today, where I'm very mindful of my water usage too.
I guess it even goes down to someone explained to me that garbage disposals in America, the things you have in the sink, they actually require water to push the whatever it is that you put in there through. So they're actually majorly wasting water that way too. But, you know, hosing down a path, buy a leaf blower, people.
So you might like this or you might not like this, but I did think I should mention it, is that Australia has more government regulation. So yeah, you might like that or you might not. I see more TV ads of things like anti-vaping or like skin cancer concerns or just overall health. I know in America there are not as many regulations around ads for health. So for example, you can advertise for medications, and like, you know, when the person talks really fast at the end, like, this product could cause cancer, it could kill you, it could drown you, it could get a shark out of the water and the shark will eat you, and if you take this medication. I feel like there's so much more of that in America, and in Australia that is just not a thing. Like, you can't. I think there's rules and regulations around that. People just don't do that here.
I guess that comes down to the difference in public health. Because in Australia, we have this really good public health system, which essentially means that it costs the government when people are vaping, and it costs them in medical bills for all the effects of vaping, etc. So they want to advertise, you know, you don't want to vape because it's bad for you. Because eventually, in the long run, if they can stop people from vaping, it is going to save lots of money in healthcare. Whereas what she was saying about advertising medications in the US, well, the government doesn't really care about regulating that because it's not costing them money. You know, there's big bucks in pharmaceuticals, and because people have to pay for their own medical costs, I guess the government doesn't see it as being something that they need to put so much regulation into, because it isn't costing in public health care.
Oh, and specifically as a kid too, I remember if you didn't bring a hat to school, you weren't allowed to play outside. So it was called like no hat, no play. And I was like a very forgetful kid, and I would always forget my hats. I had green ones, but there were these really big, like wide brimmed hats. And you had like a little tie that would go around your neck. If you weren't wearing one, you had to play inside under this like cover. And all we would do is play What Was the Time, Mr. Fox, and like play around with a tennis ball. That was kind of it. But I'm actually very thankful that Australia cares about that, because I think the skin cancer rates would be even higher if they didn't put campaigns like that. So thank you, Australia, for taking care of my baby skin. Ding. Another.
You know, I'd be really curious to see statistics in terms of people probably under the age of 30 and skin cancer rates as opposed to people over the age of 30. When you consider that when I was at school, there was no such thing as SunSmart. I can remember in high school sitting outside in the warm weather trying to actually get sun on your legs. Of course, in Tasmania, getting a suntan was pretty difficult, and I used to only ever get freckles on my knees. But either way, you know, it was a pastime when I was growing up to try and sunbake, and I think that's why my generation have had so many issues with skin cancer. So it's definitely a good thing. And I realise that we are possibly a bit unique in that we do have harsher sun. We are, during the summer, we are actually closer to the sun just because of the way the axis of the earth and everything, which means that we do have those higher rates of skin cancer. But, you know, it's something that could be adopted in other countries. It's not a bad thing.
Other thing when it comes to government is about the regulations too. Around driving, there is so much more regulation than there is in America. I only noticed this as an adult coming over now as I'm older because I was surprised at how slow people were driving on the freeway. Like in California, I swear people do like 120 miles per hour and that's just normal. Where here, you're not allowed to drive really over 100 kilometers at all. What that compares to in miles per hour is like not even next to what people are driving in California and in America in general. And I remember going back for a trip to America after living for a couple months in Australia, and I was shocked at how insane the drivers are. In America, you can drive something like 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, and that's when the police can pull you over. But in Australia, if you drive 3 kilometers over the speed limit, you will get flagged. Some of my cousins have told me stories of them going like 4 kilometers over the speed limit and getting caught for that. My American brain was shocked that they'd pull someone over for that. Like, overall, I just feel like there's way more driving regulation, which is good because it's safer, but also probably annoying. Oh my God, there's a spider. Don't move to Australia if you don't like spiders, man. They're everywhere. Obviously, it's safer with the driving regulations, but if you're someone who likes to drive crazy and not really follow the law, I'd probably say Australia isn't the best for you unless you want to live out in the middle of nowhere. Do they even have police out there? I don't even know.
Okay, this is where we need to acknowledge that Australia has a fraction of the road deaths per capita than what the USA has. There's a good reason for having these regulations. So I'm not complaining. I like that I can drive down the freeway to Melbourne and feel relatively safe doing so. Not have to worry about some moron driving double the speed that I'm driving at and putting me at risk.
This one is kind of niche, but we're a day ahead of the rest of the world. So it's kind of nice for things like movie releases or like video game releases, because technically we'll get it first because they'll say, oh, this movie releases on Friday, but we experienced Friday before everyone else experienced Friday. So it's kind of nice for that. We get things a little bit before everyone else, you know? That's a benefit of moving to Australia for sure. I distinctly remember as a kid, all of my cousins being able to open their Christmas presents first. And I was so annoyed that I had to wait another day because I just got all these photos of them opening their presents and being so excited. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to wait another day. If I was living in Australia, I could open my presents now.
Okay, well, I'm not exactly sure where that rates in terms of good reasons to move to Australia. Because, I mean, how often does that affect you? As an adult, Christmas is, you know, one day or another. If you've got kids, yeah, you enjoy the experience with the kids. But as an adult, you've learned patience, and having it one day after all your cousins, or one day earlier than all your cousins, isn't any big deal, really. But, yeah, okay, I see where she's coming from.
Another reason you should move to Australia is because you get to enjoy Tim Tams whenever you want. You can go to Coles, you can go to Woolies, and you can go pick yourself up some Tim Tams. Speaking of, let me go grab some Tim Tams right now. You thought I was joking. This pack is actually almost empty. I think there's one left, but we'll save it for the end.
Okay, let's be realistic. Thanks to Woolies and Coles, Tim Tams have just about become a luxury item now. When you're paying something like $6 for a packet of Tim Tams, I mean, really, that's just insane. it's certainly not something that you can just go out and get any day that you feel like it, especially when you consider that the cost of everything else has gone up too. So many people now just can't afford to buy Tim Tams. Maybe I should rename my Buy Me a Coffee to Buy Me a Tim Tam.
Another reason you should move to Australia is because Australians are so nice. Definitely you will be getting your mean people all the time. I think that happens no matter where you are. But I think overall, just Australians are so friendly, so welcoming, so nice. I actually had a friend, she was visiting from California. It was like their first day as a whole group of Americans, and they go and sit down at this restaurant. They meet this couple who just so happened to live nearby, and they just start talking to them. They are so curious about what America's like, and then the Americans are so curious of what Australia is like, so they're just going back and forth. And then the couple says, wait 1 second, I'll be right back. Since they lived nearby, they went home, grabbed 4 bottles of wine, and then came back and sat back at the restaurant and poured all of my friends wine. I think they ended up spending like hours just sitting with them chatting, come off of the plane, and that was like her first experience with Australians. And then the rest of her trip, everyone was just so friendly and so nice. I think that's probably one of the best things about living here, is that just people care about other people. Even personally, I know recently I was crying in a Chemist Warehouse. Don't ask me why, but someone came up to me and was like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. So she went and bought a Kit Kat and gave me a Kit Kat. It was so nice. I feel like Australia just has more like acts of kindness and people looking out for each other, and it just makes me very, very happy to live here.
You know, for the most part, Australians are pretty damn good people. There are some Karens out there, and there are some people who are not so nice, but hopefully we will never lose that sense of mateship, that sense of, yeah, doing something for somebody because we want to, not because we expect to get something back in return.
One thing about moving to Australia as well is that the education here is really, really strong.
The education here is really, really strong.
I actually looked up this stat, and it's about 1/3 of Australians send their kids to private school. Also, I think because the quality of education is quite high too. I know Victoria, the state that I'm in, is known as the education state. We have some of the top universities in the world, which I think is amazing. Also, if you're coming here for uni, the cool thing is that uni here is only 3 years, and it's not 4 years like it is in America and other countries as well. If you want to get your degree faster and get into the workforce, maybe do your education in Australia. Also, if you're planning to come over and you're of uni student kind of age, the minimum wage here is actually quite high compared to other countries. Federal minimum wage in America is something like $8 at the moment. That's $8 US. But in Australia, it's roughly around like $22. When I first heard that, I was like, no way. My first job in America, I was either 16 or 17. And I think I must have been getting $12 an hour. And I was living in California, which has one of the higher minimum wages. But I think that's quite crazy that in Australia, you're getting almost like 20 something dollars an hour. And then also on weekends, you get paid like time and a half too. So like the minimum wage jobs are not that bad. And I feel like it reflects in customer service too. I know if I go to any place in America that, I don't know, like an ice cream shop or something like that, the service is going to be like, okay. And then you also have to tip for service. But I feel like here, just the base customer service is like, oh, people actually are living a little bit better on their jobs. Obviously, no minimum wage at this point I think is very livable, and with costs going up, it's not really the best, but people are having a little bit higher of a standard of living than they are in other countries too.
I do and don't disagree with what she's saying there. Sure, if you're talking about adults who've been in the workforce for a while, then chances are they are happy in their job. Well, you know, hopefully happy enough in their job that they are going to be polite to you, they're going to give you good service. But that's also a cultural thing too. I mean, we are friendly people. But can we just acknowledge that if you go somewhere on a Friday night or on a Saturday to the sort of businesses that employ teenagers, they really don't get customer service. Not at all. And even some places where you know, they might be not so much teenagers but new to the workforce. I was in Aldi the other week, and the woman in front of me, while she was being served, the young guy at the counter was also looking up tickets for something. Must have been travel tickets, because while he was still serving her, he's looking up tickets on his mobile phone, and then he says into his little mouthpiece that they have at Aldi to someone who must have been like in the stockroom or something, no, the cheapest tickets are $500. And I was just gobsmacked. I'm like, you're meant to be serving customers. You've barely acknowledged this woman that you are serving. And she'd even asked him a question, and she had to ask him again because he didn't hear her the first time round because he was too busy searching on his phone. So, you know, I think it definitely comes down to there are still plenty of young people out there who haven't learnt a work ethic yet.
Now, I'm specifically in Melbourne, so it is the city of events, but I feel like Australia overall has some really great events that are on a worldwide stage. For example, we have the Australian Open that's coming up in January. Definitely got some vlogs coming up for that. We have the F1 racing. I know they've held like rugby tournaments. Just there's so much around sports specifically, but then also just other really great events too. I think we were even supposed to hold the Commonwealth Games here, but then I don't know what happened to that. Oh, and we even have the Brisbane Olympics coming up. But overall, I think it's so great that there's like these really big events and such cool experiences that you can get just in Australia, and you don't need to go to somewhere like New York or London to have that experience too.
My experience when it comes to Melbourne is that there is so much on all the time that unless you have a bucket load of money, you have to miss out on some of the really brilliant things because you've got to choose between the things that you want to do. And, you know, it's exhibitions, it's things like there's this massive drone show happening around Christmas time. Not that I would go down for that because I can't imagine what the crowds will be like, but I don't want to know. But, and, you know, musical theatre, if you're into musical theatre, we have world-class musical theatre. There's always 2 or 3 things on down in Melbourne at any time. There's amazing exhibitions, like the Pharaoh exhibition that I went to several months back was just, I mean, that was the British Museum. That was phenomenal. I went and saw Sister Act at the Regent Theatre. That was brilliant. You know, things like that all the time. So she's got a point there. So for those of you who are probably feeling disappointed by the absence of snoring, seems like when it's warm like this my guys don't tend to snore so much. I don't know why. So I thought I'd just finish with pictures of my co-hosts since they've been pretty quiet this time round. So that brings us to the end of this video. I was really glad that she was saying sensible things that so often are not said by people who really don't understand Australia. So she shows us that she does actually understand Australia. So I do now owe an apology for my little snarkiness at the beginning over the Australian National Anthem, because the rest of what she said was pretty good. So thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button to help me get these videos out into the algorithm, and leave me a comment. What did you think about this video? Thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.